Church is a place to learn God's doctrine. But what happens when church becomes a place of restrictions, godlike leaders, shunned behavior, and exclusions? Doctrines that could lead to deadly consequences. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. When church becomes more than just a place of worship. Cult culture.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of The Big E, The Elephant in the Room. My name is Jackie.
And I'm Melissa.
And today we're both going to be talking about cult culture. Also, we have two very special guests with us. We have Mr. Anthony Wallen and we have Mr. Mason West. They are both wonderful people who can talk about this topic and bring insight on what it is about cult culture. So when you hear the word cult, you tend to think of some type of group, some type of closed-minded things that happen to people or that are being directed in an unhealthy manner. So I wanted to know from our guests and from our audience, do you know anyone that's in an unhealthy relationship with religion, with spirituality? Do you feel sometimes that you're told what to do and without even having like a free moment of thinking? Have you ever seen anyone who doesn't feel like they are welcome sometimes in a type of culture that is religious or spiritual? So we're going to be talking about something like that today. And again, our guests are here to bring more insight about that. Again, thank you again, Mason and Anthony, for coming and joining us here at the Big E, the Elephant in the Room. I'm going to go ahead and start with Mr. Mason. Mr. Mason, would you mind telling the audience a little bit about your background?
Yes, I'm an educator. As far as my education, I received a degree in theology, then in urban and regional planning, and then pursuing a doctorate in educational leadership. And for most of my career, I've been an educator at some level and have also done consulting for private, public, and nonprofit sector organizations, specifically in education or program development, from prevention, intervention, in treatment in gangs years ago, to the same thing in counterterrorism. And presently, I'm the diversity, equity, and inclusion director at an independent school in Northern Georgia called Rabin Gap-Nacoochee School.
Amazing, amazing. And it sounds like a lot of mind control, a lot of organizations, a lot of people that you deal with groups. So that's, again, why you're here. And Anthony, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself too?
Excuse me. My name is Anthony Wallen. I guess I kind of grew up in the church. My dad was a preacher, so I was a PK. So I guess that's what brought me to this discussion today. Been working in video production and photography for the last 25 years. Currently, I run distribution for a camera company out of the Netherlands, here in Atlanta, Georgia. But other than that, I'm a father with 3 kids and trying to keep them out of the madness and screw a good head on their shoulders.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing what both of you all do. So that brings me to a question. When you see someone that seems to be secluded, or there's a leader who tends to just use certain scriptures or holy books to gather the flock into thinking in one way, what brings you to mind? What brings to mind with you when you see something like that?
So if you are talking about a situation where someone tends to control another individual or control a group, what comes to my mind is what processes or mechanisms can be used to free that person from someone else's control so that they think independently and they move independently through this world. Those are the first thoughts that come to my mind.
Me personally, I mean, I kind of get what you're alluding to. There's a lot of people that I grew up with in the church that would say that a lot of their decisions God made for them, or, you know, they talked to the pastor and the pastor told them this and then they made a decision. It seems like a lot of the stuff is not not necessarily overtly controlled by that religious entity. I think a lot of people use the religion or the figurehead to cover, to provide cover for their decisions sometimes. And it seems almost as if they don't really make their own decision. I mean, of course they do make their own decision, but it's sometimes from a perspective, in my opinion, that it seems like a big brother telling a little brother to do something, something bad happening to the little brother, and the little brother says, well, he told me to do it.
I've spoken to a lot of individuals throughout the course of my life, and a lot of times we become, of course, born into a religion or born into our traditions. So do you think over time, of course, as we grow, we learn, and then we start to become more knowledgeable to see if this was something that mom and dad told us to do, or is this something that we really genuinely believe in? So what is your insight of your experience with that?
Well, if you look at people's commitment to their religion, it's usually based on geography. It's not usually based on, I'm talking about people who were raised in a religion. If you were born in a region of the world where, the population was mostly Hindu or Buddhist or Muslim or Christian, you tend to be that religion because it's cultural. It's based on geography, not based on a choice that you made. Usually as people grow and they begin to ask questions, because no religion can fully explain God. There is no group of human beings born in sin and shaped in iniquity that can define an omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent being. So usually there are questions that you will ask that are outside of the realms of your religion. Once you begin to ask those questions, if that religion allows you to ask them, you start to make decisions for yourself. The sad part about it is a good number of people never really get that opportunity. The systems of control, the systems of influence, the path to a transcendental life, and the power of a charismatic leader usually leaves them in some type of psychological or mental prison, that they don't realize. And they're never really making decisions for themselves. They're making decisions based on the mandate of a religion and their fear of going to a hell or missing out on a heaven. So I think that most people, choices are made for them until at some point in their life, they're able to ask those questions that usually leads them on a path of making decisions for themselves.
I was born into the religion, and I kind of did what I was told. Oddly enough, when I was very young, I didn't believe what I was being told. And it wasn't just because the stories were so amazing. It was just, I just didn't believe the stories. And so from very young age, I was a non-believer. And I was in this church where I had to pretend to be a believer, because if you did not show that everything that you were being told was the way it should be, then you were ostracized or punished or something like that. So I kind of, did my own thing while behaving and doing what I was told to do so I didn't get in trouble. Becoming an adult, I stopped going to church, and I was, I guess, agnostic. I higher powers there or whatever, but I don't know if it was a man that was on a cross that's the son of this other guy that has angels and all the revelation stuff happens. I don't know if that's the story. That's just one explanation of many different stories that have been told many different ways by many different cultures, as Mason was saying. So for me personally, I was forced one way, and then as I grew older, as Mason said, I kind of made my own decision and did my own things. Now with my kids, when we got married, I told my wife, I was like, look, I would really like to let the kids make their own decision. If you want to take them to church and do the church thing, I'm not going to stop them. I'm not going to be that dad that badmouths what mom's doing. If that's what you want to do, do that. But I'm not going to force them. I'm not going to be, that supporting person that forces that on them. If they grow older and they decide that they want to be in church, that's their decision that they made. So it's interesting because you can go in either direction where you can force them to do something, but then forcing them not to do anything, is that just as detrimental to their development spiritually? So right now, my kids are teenagers, and they see certain things about how my wife practices in her family, and my family as well, and then what I do now. And they're kind of like in this place where they have questions, and if they want to ask, they'll ask. If they, they kind of let everybody do their own thing. So it's like 6 in one, half dozen in the other. But I don't think that not forcing them into religion could have been as mind screwy as forcing it, because then you have to undo some stuff that you do or don't believe in. Whereas if you have an open slate and you make your choices as you go along and you witness things, you're kind of more clear-minded to have your own opinion about these things. At least that's the way I'm approaching it.
Excellent. And that was going to be my next question too. How do you think this generation behaves in a way where there is no direct leadership or cult-like thinking, meaning one way of thinking in your households? How has it affected your children? And you both mentioned that you have children. Are they affected any way by that type of mindset?
Well, with my children, since the time they were children, my oldest is 26 and my youngest is 13, is I've always wanted them to ask questions. The reason why I'm a person who believes in the Creator. I am a Christian, but I don't believe that my religion has all the answers. I've always wanted them to ask questions. I always used to ask, how could there be an evening and a morning where the first day or the second day or the third day, when the sun was created on the fourth day, and the way we measure, a day is our Earth's rotation on its axis and then its revolution around the sun, which was a difficult question for pastors and Sabbath school or Sunday school teachers to answer, but because I was allowed to ask that question, I didn't discover the answer when I was young, but when I began to explore science and Einstein's theory of relativity and time-space continuum, then, I got the answer. But if someone would have shut me down and not allowed me to ask that would have been detrimental. So there have been many questions that I could not answer for my children when they were 6 or 7 years old. But as they grew older and gained an education and things like that, they were able, through an exploration of science, of the sciences, math, and the humanities, to discover the answers for themselves. The challenge for religions is when they create an absolute, like the Catholic Church did in geocentric theory, saying that the earth was the center of it all, is when people get an education and then they realize that the church is wrong, then the church runs into a problem of either their connection with God wasn't real, or their God that they professed isn't real. And that is the problem with religions creating an absolute, because someone's discovery of the universe will reveal that your absolute is wrong. I didn't want that to happen to my children. So the challenge for them is to continue to ask questions, and that's led them on some interesting journeys, but at least they're still on the journey. They did not shut down to religion or shut down, to exploring beliefs because someone tried to force them by not allowing them to explore the universe. Last thing I'll say, because if I believe that my God created everything, then you can ask a question about everything and he will provide the answer. So there was no need for me to fear, their questions, even if it came from a religious point of view, an atheistic point of view, or an agnostic point of view, they would get the answer.
When it comes to religion, everyone has that fundamental guidelines that a lot of churches follow. When you're going into a church, you have these fundamentals, and they're saying they're getting the fundamental guidelines from what the Bible is actually saying. But is it really them, what their interpretation of what they feel it should be saying, what they feel that their denomination should be saying, or is it really actually what the Bible is actually saying? Because it's a lot, you always say, anybody says the interpretation or your own personal relationship with God, how can they actually say, okay, this is directly what God is saying, when you have all these, everybody has their own viewpoint? What is your outlook on that of when you see these religions with these fundamentals and these guidelines and the do's and the don'ts?
And as far as when you say fundamental, beliefs, there are some things that we assume are fundamental beliefs because they're a part of the cultural aspect of our religion. But, we forget what it took for the church to develop these beliefs. We look at the Bible as one book, but it's different books, written from 1500 BC to 97 AD. And that's just those that were canonized by the Roman Catholic Church. There are many more books that, in I think it was 397 AD, they decided which books would be the Bible. This was people through highly political meetings that sought to decide what would be the Bible. And then things we think are fundamental, like God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, they argued over for years and had meetings called ecumenical councils, just deciding, if there was a Trinity, if Jesus was both man and God. They argued literally for centuries over these things. And then even after the Roman Catholic Church came to the idea of a centralized doctrine, a centralized book, then you had the whole Protestant Reformation. And then out of the Protestant Reformation, the development of thousands of different Christian denominations, all of their beliefs based on human perspective. But nobody really arrives at a central truth, because it will take all eternity for us, to get at this central truth of who God is. Even Moses, after 40 years in Egypt, 40 years in the wilderness, after seeing all of the miracles in Egypt and in the wilderness, and seeing God write the commandments with his finger, still told God, I don't know you. Show me your will. Let me see your face. And still God told him, you can't see my face. You'll die. That's how close yet far Moses was from God. So I don't think to run through our daily lives, we need some fundamental beliefs. But what we call fundamental about God, we're still on a journey developing them. Now, any society needs some type of, of laws, to prevent anarchy, and chaos. We all engage in some type of social contract with our government, so we're not murdering each other, so there's not pedophilia, or social, economic, or civic injustice. And a lot of times those laws are based on some type of morality, and that morality comes from somewhere. So we all have to agree on some basics for how we live and strive together. And even that is a struggle right now. So I do think that we all need to be going on that journey, but we will always be kind of arguing over what the fundamental is, what God is. And I don't think we ever arrive, at that truth, but it's important that we stay on that journey.
We know that God has called you to a mission, but sometimes you need a little help getting there. At the Center for Clergy and Church Support, we strive to encourage, empower, and equip ministries and nonprofit organizations to do all that God has called them to do. We handle basic legal issues, conduct administrative and financial audits, and strengthen organizations in community engagement and capacity building. Let us help your ministry or nonprofit in advancing the kingdom of God. Visit clergycenter.org for more information.
What are some signs when you think a church is turning into a cult?
Well, usually with a cult, they say that there are, 4 essential elements that make an organization a cult. Usually there is a charismatic leader who comes up with the idea of the cult. And usually that charismatic leader creates some type of transcendental lifestyle. What do we mean by transcendental is that you will get from that charismatic leader takes you from one level to a next level. And then there are a system of control where they invent specific behaviors in which you have to engage in order to get to that next level. And then number 4, a system of influences where people around you through peer pressure model behavior that you have to engage in. And if you don't model that or obey the rules or follow the charismatic leader, then you are marginalized or ostracized.
Now, there is a such thing as a semi-cult, which is in the church where the members of the church get so enamored by the charismatic preacher that they seem like they don't want to hear from anybody else, only that particular preacher. And I know in the church, the religion I grew up in, one of the things that they did was they would move the preacher around every 4 or 6 years so that the flock did not get too attached. And so I moved around every 4 years growing up because we would just go to a different church, a different church, and a different church. And I still know people that call my dad from 35 years ago that if I was to fly to Los Angeles, they would put me up and, oh, this is Victor's son. I'm Victor. I'm not even my own person yet. I'm still the preacher's son. Even though I'm 46 with my own children, I'm still Victor's son and am treated like royalty because of such. So it does happen in the church to some extent. My dad had this particular thing of preaching from an Afrocentric background. And so the people that had not heard that and had not had a lot of pro-Black encouragement in their lives, when they heard someone preaching about, we all came from Africa and, these are the stories in the Bible, but he's telling them from an African perspective, that really like opened up some people's minds. And they're like dedicated sheep. I don't know what else to call it, but it was good for them. But at the end of the day, honestly, wasn't religion created to control and like slaves and whatnot? I mean, that there's so many, like me personally, there are, certain things about the church that as a Black person, I still kind of,
It makes you wonder.
It makes me like, it's like, have we been so brainwashed as a culture by religion that we're in a cult and we don't even know it?
Wow. And why do some cult leaders lead them to death though and suicide? What's that about?
It's up.
Usually when the system of control does not work and that cult leader has defined their life. You saw that with that cult. That's their existence. That's their primary source of political and economic and social power. You saw that with Jim Jones. You saw that with, that was a cult, the People's Temple of the Disciples of Christ. You also saw that with Heaven's Gate. You're seeing it right now. You're seeing Donald Trump, which I believe, is a cultic leader, who's willing to create, pretty much political suicide and take the entire Republican Party down with him because of a loss of political, social, and economic power. So usually that's what these cult leaders will do. If they lose the source of their power, they'll go and they'll take as many people with them as possible.
Excellent.
So true.
Any more points before we wrap up?
No, that was well said, Mason.
That was well said.
Wow. The Trump cult right now is the biggest cult, and I tend not to go there because this is America, and I tend to
That's a whole nother 30 minminutes right
yeah,
there.
that's a much longer than 30-minute conversation, but that is the honestly, that's the Trump cult there. That cult trumps all other
Yeah.
cults.
Melissa, you have any final thoughts?
I just honestly, my personal with this whole cult and culture, I feel like it's all about dividing and destroying in some aspects. I feel like it's like you said with Trump, it's trying to just take down and just trying to break down as as many people try to destroy people and try to instead of trying to unite and bring us all together with all of these different religions. And it's unfortunate that people don't realize when they get caught up in a cult or in a denomination and realize that it's really dividing us and separating us. And that's not even getting back to your point, even under the political sector. It's dividing us and separating us and and it's causing a lot of unnecessary confusion. And I think this is why on our platform, the big E, the elephant in the room, a lot of people don't like talking about religion. A lot of people don't like talking about politics because it's a lot of controversy and a lot of division because of people's mindset, thought process, and how they were raised and their outlooks on their various views. But I truly, truly appreciate you gentlemen being so transparent, being just truly knowledgeable and allowing people to know that it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to be who you are, to be yourself, and not feel like you're being judged. Because regardless, this is why Jackie and I have this platform to talk about it.
Hey, really quickly, just real quickly, quick story. Now, I practice Buddhism now, and I was in a hardware store, and this woman didn't know where something was, and I spent 30 minutes walking around the store with this woman until we found it. And then she said, "Oh, what church do you go to?" I said, "Well, I'm not in the church anymore. I practice Buddhism." And she was like, "Oh, do you say that Nam Myoho?" Yeah, yeah. I said, "Yes, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo." She's like, "Oh, I know. There was this radio DJ and he was such a nice guy. Okay, you're doing good. You're doing good." And she said, "Thank you so much." She went on about her way. And honestly, I was like, okay, there are some religious people that are open-minded and have that same outlook, like, you can do your thing and as long as you have something that you're doing, that's good. I appreciate those type of people. It's the ones that are like, "Oh no, if my aunt at Thanksgiving a couple of years ago said, has your family started practicing that Buddha stuff yet?" And I said, "No, it's just me." She said, "Oh, okay, well, good. There's still hope for the rest of them." I'm like, what? So how is one supposed to take that? So it's like people need to open up and be a little bit more open-minded to things, in my opinion, because you risk trapping yourself into a cult-ish mentality and behavior that is really not necessary, especially when all of religious and all that stuff is supposed to bring us together and I believe to bring together and unify us as a people. And whenever that it divides and separates that, we have a problem.
Well said. Mason, you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think one thing we should realize is the ultimate power of religion or any cult is the absolute. When anybody can convince you that there's an absolute way of doing things. And when you succumb to the absolute, then you will marginalize or ostracize or oppress, other people. And we have to make sure that we realize there is no human being that has an absolute view of God or knows the absolute path to a heaven or a hell. It's something we are all growing to realize. It's something we are all learning. And I think if we can rid ourselves of the absolute, we can rid ourselves of the control of cults and negative religions.
Well said. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you so much, audience, for joining us. Remember to tune in next time where we speak about the unspeakable.